There's a tax that nobody officially charges you, that doesn't show up on any bill, and that most people in your situation have just quietly accepted as part of life. It shows up in your rent, your groceries, your health insurance, your car costs, your travel, and about a dozen other places. And the frustrating part is that it's not because you're doing anything wrong or spending carelessly. It's because the entire financial infrastructure of modern life was built around the assumption that adults come in pairs. And if you don't, you pay a premium for the inconvenience of being one person. It's called the singles tax. And it's more significant than most people realize. Now, I want to be clear about something right away. This isn't a video about feeling sorry for single people or suggesting that being single is a financial disadvantage you need to fix by finding a partner. That framing is both patronizing and financially inaccurate because plenty of coupled households carry their own financial inefficiencies and complications. This is a video about understanding a specific structural reality so you can make smarter decisions within it. The enemy here isn't your relationship status. It's the system that prices things as if your relationship status were different. Let's start with the biggest one: housing. If you're renting alone, you're paying the full cost of a unit that was built to house at least 2 adults. The studio or one-bedroom you live in costs, on average, somewhere between 60 and 80% of what a 2-bedroom costs in most markets. But you're one person instead of 2. So per person, you're often paying significantly more than someone splitting a larger apartment. And if you're in a major city, that gap compounds dramatically. Your coupled colleagues earning the same income as you are often spending a significantly lower percentage of their income on housing. Not because they earn more, because they share a fixed cost that you carry alone. This is what economists call economies of scale. Basically, the idea that some costs don't double when you add a second person. Rent doesn't double when you add a roommate. The electricity bill doesn't double. The streaming subscriptions don't double. Coupled households naturally share these fixed costs, which means they effectively earn more spendable income at the same salary level. For single people, the financial impact is real and measurable. Research has suggested that single people need to earn roughly 20 to 30% more than a partnered person to achieve the same standard of living. That's not a small gap. That's a structural disadvantage built into the economics of everyday life, and housing is just the most visible version. However, it shows up everywhere. Let's talk about groceries. Food packaging is designed for 2 to 4 people. The family-size bag of rice, the 2-pound bag of chicken, the 4-pack of yogurt. Unit pricing almost always favors the larger quantity, which means that when you buy the smaller size, because you actually need the smaller size, you're paying a higher price per ounce, per serving, per meal. You can't take advantage of bulk purchasing the same way. You can't split a Costco run with a partner. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just not the customer that the grocery economy was designed around. Another example is car costs. Single-income households carry the full cost of a vehicle alone, insurance, maintenance, payments, with no one to share it. If you own a car in a relationship, there's at least the option to share the vehicle and potentially eliminate a second car entirely. Single people who need transportation generally don't have that option. And if your car needs a repair, that cost lands entirely on you with no financial backup to absorb part of the hit. Healthcare is another one. In the United States specifically, employer-sponsored health insurance is significantly more affordable per person when you're on a family or couples plan. A single person on an individual plan often pays close to the same premium per month as someone on a family plan who is covering a spouse and children. The actuarial logic is complicated, but the result is that single people subsidize the healthcare system while paying roughly comparable premiums for less coverage and no dependents. It's one of the least discussed but most financially significant examples of how the system prices single living at a premium. Even travel. Hotels price by room, not by occupant. A single person paying for a hotel room is paying the same base rate as 2 people sharing it. Single supplement fees on cruises and group tours, An actual line item that travel companies charge single travelers for the audacity of not bringing a second person can add 20 to 100% to the cost of a trip. This one gets under people's skin more than almost any other because it's so explicitly visible on a bill. Now here's the thing. Most financial advice for single people either ignores this structural reality entirely, it just tells you to budget better and save more, as if the problem is behavioral, or it acknowledges the gap and offers nothing useful beyond sympathy. Neither of those actually helps. So let's talk about what does. The first area where you genuinely have leverage is housing. The obvious response to the singles housing premium is roommates. And if that's workable for your situation, it's one of the most financially powerful moves available to you. Splitting a two-bedroom with one other person typically costs less per person than a studio alone, while also giving you more space. The math is almost always favorable. The resistance is usually psychological, the privacy preference, the life stage feeling of having your own place. Those are real preferences, and you're allowed to have them. But it's worth being honest about what you're paying for them. If sharing a two-bedroom saves you $400 to $600 a month compared to a solo studio, that's $5,000 to $7,000 a year. Money that could be building towards something real instead of funding a preference. If roommates aren't workable, the next lever is location arbitrage within your city. Single people have more flexibility in where they live than coupled people in many ways. No need to negotiate two sets of commutes, two sets of preferences, two sets of social circles. That flexibility is genuinely valuable. Using it to live in a slightly less expensive neighborhood, or to choose a building that's less status signaling but equally functional, is one of the clearest ways to recover some of the singles housing premium. On groceries, the single most effective strategy most people don't fully use is the freezer as a financial tool. Buying family-sized portions when they're on sale, cooking in batches and freezing individual portions, treating the freezer like a buffer against single-serving pricing. This is the closest thing a single person has to the bulk purchasing advantage of a larger household. It requires a small amount of upfront planning, but it meaningfully reduces the per meal cost gap. The difference between buying chicken breasts in a family pack versus individual portions can be 40 to 60% per pound. Over a year, that adds up to several $100s on one item alone. Meal kit subscriptions and grocery delivery services with good per-item pricing can also work in favor of single people. They allow precise purchasing without the waste that comes from buying a four-person quantity of something you'll use one portion of. The unit economics don't always favor this approach, but it's worth running the numbers on your specific situation rather than assuming the traditional grocery model is always cheaper. On the healthcare front, if you're employed, it's worth taking a serious look at whether a health savings account, or HSA, is available to you. HSAs are only available with high-deductible health plans, but for single people who are generally healthy, the combination of a lower premium high-deductible plan with an HSA can be financially superior to a standard plan. The money in an HSA rolls over indefinitely, can be invested, and eventually can be used for any purpose after age 65. Essentially functioning as an additional retirement account. It's one of the few parts of the healthcare system where single people can actually come out ahead relative to their coupled peers if they use it correctly. On travel, the single supplement problem is real, but it's also one of the more solvable ones on this list. Solo travel has become a large enough market that a growing number of tour operators, cruise lines, and accommodation options have started offering single supplement-free pricing or even purpose-built solo traveler packages. It requires more research than booking as a couple, but the options are meaningfully better than they were 10 years ago. Looking specifically for hostels with private rooms, Airbnb listings where you're renting a private room rather than an entire property, and travel companies that have explicitly marketed to solo travelers can eliminate or significantly reduce the premium. Here's the broader reframe I want to offer before we close. The singles tax is real, it's structural, and it's not your fault. But the response to it is not to feel victimized by it or to make financial decisions out of resentment toward a system that wasn't designed for you. The response is to understand exactly where the premium shows up, make deliberate choices about which premiums are worth paying and which aren't, and use the specific flexibilities that single living actually provides: mobility, optionality, the ability to make unilateral financial decisions without negotiation as genuine advantages. Because there are real advantages, you make every financial decision alone, which means every good financial decision is entirely your own. You can move cities for a career opportunity without coordinating a partner's life. You can change your spending, your savings rate, your investment strategy without anyone else's buy-in. You can optimize for your actual preferences rather than a household compromise. You can decide overnight to cut a subscription, change your insurance plan, or redirect $300 a month into investments without a single conversation. These aren't consolation prizes. They're real structural advantages that coupled people often wish they had. The singles tax is a real cost, but single living also comes with a real set of freedoms that have financial value if you use them. The goal isn't to pretend the tax doesn't exist. It's to pay it consciously, reduce it where you can, and use what you actually have rather than spending energy resenting what the system assumed you'd have. If this gave you a clearer picture of what you're actually navigating, subscribe. Every week we break down the financial systems and psychological patterns that affect your money in ways nobody else is talking about. And drop a comment. Which part of the singles tax hits hardest for you? I'd genuinely like to know.